So the climate crisis is a symptom of many interconnected problems, from the food that we eat, to the clothes that we wear, to how we get around the places we live. And that means that we need to rethink so much of how we live, exist, and innovate in the 21st century. The climate crisis is the greatest threat we've ever faced, but it's also our biggest opportunity to rethink so much. And for me, that is an incredible invitation to innovate, to rethink how we connect and communicate with one another. And particularly for those who have contributed the most to the climate crisis, including companies, it's an opportunity to think about how we create value in a radically different way, in a way that isn't extractive, in a way that doesn't commodify nature and exploit frontline communities, but that delivers real value and that builds fair and equitable communities. I think when we consider individual actions, the first thing that comes to mind is stuff like turning off the lights when you leave a room and making a monthly donation or buying a reusable coffee cup. Yet of course we know that the climate crisis demands systemic solutions. So individual action is incredibly important, but I'd challenge that premise to say, what does individual influence look like? And for me, the greatest impact you can have as an individual is thinking about how you spend your 9 to 5. You know, where do you work? If you work at a company, how do you exert your influence? How do you consider, what is the problem that ignites a fire in your belly, and what skills and talents you have to show up and solve that thing? The climate crisis is not going to be solved by a handful of people taking action perfectly. It's going to be solved by millions of people taking action imperfectly. It requires all of us, so no matter whether you work on a construction site or you work in a glass tower at a company, it demands all of us step up rather than shut down in the face of this problem. Companies have a huge responsibility, and as I like to say, great responsibility comes with great power. Companies like Danone, companies that have so many brands on the supermarket shelves, have the potential to influence billions of lives. And companies really need to think about how to make solutions as accessible as possible. With that, again, comes an invitation to think about, well, what does a fair and equitable, sustainable agricultural system actually look like? And as a company, how do we expand our sphere of influence? Not just to the supermarket shelf, but how those products get onto the shelf, how consumers engage with those products, and what ends up happening with them as well. So there's a huge opportunity for Danone to really be part of the solution. And critically, what we need to do is more partnership. We need to think about who needs to be at the table and how do we make sure they're there. So in the context of agriculture, that really means how do we get the millions of people who are part of sustaining the current agricultural system, and how do we fund and make accessible and possible a much more sustainable food system. We recognize that it's no longer enough to stay within the co-opted definition of sustainability, which just means sustaining the current system. We actually need to not just stop emitting, we need to sequester the carbon that has already been emitted. And at the heart of that is ensuring that we're thriving alongside life on this planet. It means bringing back biodiversity. It means conserving our most precious ecosystem. It means, creating spaces for people to really live in fair and equitable communities, not in opposition to nature, but alongside it. And as I've heard over the past couple of days, at the heart of that is again the people who are on the front lines of agricultural systems. So I've loved hearing about these case studies of farmers who are already leading the solutions. And again, when there are barriers to engagement, Danone stepping into the picture to actually fund and support that transition.